Hey friends, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Gabby, and today we're going to be doing an Emily Henry reading guide. It's been so long since the last time that I made a reading guide. I actually have made a video similar to this for both Riley Sager and Taylor Jenkins Reid, so if you like this style of video and you want to see more for different authors, I will have those linked down below. But I thought, it's about time that I make one for Emily Henry because Emily Henry has published a number of adult romance books. And so in this video, I'm going to be talking all about her 6 adult romance books. I'll be letting you know the general ratings, the premise of each one of the books. I'll be ranking them. I'll be letting you know where to start with her books. I'll also be letting you know about some common tropes that I've noticed in her books, as well as letting you know about authors with some similar vibes, and then doing the if you liked this book, maybe you should read this other book or check out this movie or TV show, and then also picking a Taylor Swift song that matches each one of the books. Because, I'm a big Swiftie, and that's one of my favorite things ever, is trying to figure out which Taylor Swift song has the same vibes as these books. So all of those things will be covered in today's video. I'll have timestamps down below if you wanted to jump around. But if you were wondering, Emily Henry actually got her start with publishing young adult books, and she has a few different young adult books. I've read 3 of them. The first book that she ever published was back in 2016. It was The Love That Split the World, and this is a book that I personally gave 3 stars. And then after that, in 2017, she came out with a book called A Million Junes, and I gave this one 4 stars. It's my highest rated of her young adult books, and I think this one is the most popular of her young adult books. And then in the year 2019, she had a young adult book called When the Sky Fell on Splendor, and this one was a little bit more like young adult sci-fi kind of a vibe. I gave this book 2 stars. A lot of people compared this one to Stranger Things, and I just didn't think it was that compelling or that interesting. And this is probably her least popular book because this one only has 8,000 ratings on Goodreads. Not a lot of people have read this one. And then the only YA book of hers that I haven't yet read is this one called Hello Girls, which also came out in 2019, but this one is a collaboration with another author, so I was never really that interested in picking this one up. Were the 4 books that she started her career with, which is cool to know. I always love to see when an author can pivot from writing young adult fiction into adult fiction, and I feel like Emily Henry is one of the biggest success stories with an author successfully being able to do that. Because it was in the year of 2020 that she published her first adult romance book, which was Beach Read, and this one has a 3.99 average rating on Goodreads with over 1.4 million ratings. This one is very popular, if not maybe her most popular adult romance book. In this story, we follow these 2 characters who are writers. We follow Augustus Everett, and then we also follow January Andrews, and she is a romance writer who no longer believes in love, and then he is a literary writer who is just stuck in a rut. And so they cross paths one summer, and they decide that they're going to swap genres for the summer. So she's going to try to write some literary fiction, and he's going to try to write romance. This one all takes place over the summer, and it's definitely that forced proximity because they're going to be living right next door to each other from what I remember. Her next book was published in 2021, and it was People We Meet on Vacation, and this one currently has an average rating of 3.85, and this one also has 1.4 million ratings on Goodreads. This is another one that's one of her most popular books. This one actually won the Goodreads category for romance back in 2021, and in this book we kind of have the friends to lovers trope because we're following these characters named Alex and Poppy, and we kind of follow them over about a decade of their lives. They met when they were back in college and they became best friends, and then every single year, even though they don't live in the same place, because I believe she lives in New York City and then he lives in their small town, but every single summer they've taken a vacation together to get some time together. But now the story's taking place 2 years after everything changed and they stopped talking to each other. So in this book, you're kind of trying to figure out what actually happened between them and why did they stop speaking to each other and what's going on now, and there's all this tension, and it's about how they're going to be taking one final vacation together to try to fix everything, and so they only have a week to get it right. And this one has some amazing vacation summer vibes as well. Alright, and then the next book she came out with in 2022 was Book Lovers, and this one has an average rating of 4.11 with 1.3 million ratings. This one is about this woman named Nora who is a book editor, and she's a literary agent, and she lives in New York City, and she's described as being an ice cold bitch or a shark. And she has this little sister named Libby who is currently pregnant, and the little sister is begging her to go on this trip with her to this place called Sunshine Falls because she really wants to have one final trip with her sister before she has another child and her life is just completely disrupted. And then the romance in this book is between her and this guy named Charlie, who is a book editor back in New York City. He works at the same publisher that she does, I'm pretty sure, and it's about how she keeps bumping into him in this small town. This one also kind of takes place over the period of a summer. I feel feel like most of her books are perfect reads for the summertime. And if you were wondering, this book also did win the romance category in the year of 2022 at the Goodreads Choice Awards. And then next up in 2023, she published Happy Place, and this one has an average of 3.96 with 1.2 million ratings. This is one of her only books that involves a second chance romance because we're following these two characters, Harriet and Wynne, and they were together when they were in college and they were the perfect couple, but now the story's taking place when they just broke up 6 months ago, but they're gonna be going to this little cottage in Maine with all of their friends. But the thing is that this cottage that they're going to with their friends is currently for sale, and so this is the last summer they're gonna have with their friends at this cottage, which is kind of like one of their traditions with their friends, and so they don't want to ruin the vibes of the last summer with their friends there together, so they tell all of their friends that they're still together. We kind of have like a fake dating situation happening with these two because they're not actually together anymore, but then it's also like second chance at the same time. And this book was also the winner of the Goodreads Choice Awards romance category in the year of 2023. Next up in the year of 2024, she published the book Funny Story, and this one has an average of 4.21 on Goodreads with 1 million ratings. In this story, we're following this woman named Daphne who is a librarian, and she's engaged to this guy named Peter, who turns out he's an absolute asshole, and Peter is slowly falling in love with his childhood best friend, this woman named Petra, and she finds out in the worst possible way that Peter's gonna be leaving her for this other woman named Petra, and she doesn't have anywhere to live now. The wedding's called off, everything's a mess. And then this is a romance between her and this guy named Miles, who also happens to be the guy that was dating Petra, and so they decide to live together because they both just got screwed by the people that they were dating and they don't have anywhere to live. And then there's also an element of like fake dating in this as well, because then these two start to pretend that they're fake dating to try to make their exes jealous and make them like regret what they did. And this one was also the winner of the romance category in 2024 at the Goodreads Choice Awards. I swear, Emily Henry dominates in that category. And then finally, her most recently published book is this one called Great Big Beautiful Life. This one just came out in 2025, and this one currently has a 4.16 average rating on Goodreads with only about 83,000 ratings. But again, this book just came out like less than a month ago at the time that I'm filming this, so I'm sure this book is gonna surpass 1 million ratings in no time. And I know this rating is definitely gonna fluctuate a little bit as more people are reading the book. In this story, we are following two writers. We're following Alice and Hayden, and they're both going to get the opportunity to write this story about this woman's life. There's this really older famous rich woman named Margaret, and she's gonna be telling the story about her family and all of the drama that happened with her family, and she's looking for the perfect writer to share her story. And so this one's kind of like, you know, it's a competition where they're kind of pitted against each other to be the one who's gonna tell her story. And so those are the 6 books that she's come out with so far. Some of the common tropes or like common things that I've noticed that she writes about. I mean, if you like books that follow writers or like characters that work in the publishing industry, she definitely has a few books that have those things, like Beach Read, Great Big Beautiful Life, and Book Lovers. These books all have characters that are writers or they work in book publishing. I think one of the only second chance romance books that she's had is Happy Place, and then the only true friends to lovers is People We Meet on Vacation. There's also a bit of a hate to love vibe in both Beach Read and in Book Lovers, or at least there's like a lot of banter and like they don't like each other right from the jump. There is the fake dating happening in Funny Story, and I'm pretty sure this is the only one. I mean, Happy Place does have a little bit of fake dating as well, but this one has a little bit more fake dating. And then I also wanted to mention that there are 2 books of hers that I personally feel like they read a little bit more like literary fiction as opposed to romance, because they're a little bit more serious, and that's gonna be Beach Read and Great Big Beautiful Life. I feel like both of these books are very similar in tone in that they're a lot more serious than these other books. Like most of her other books are kind of silly, fun, lighthearted, whereas these 2 books in particular feel a little bit more emotional, a little bit more heavy. So let's talk about my rankings and which ones are my favorite. My number 1 favorite Emily Henry book is Book Lovers, and in fact, this is the only book of hers that I've reread, and I love this so much. But this one really appeals to like my personal taste in romance because I love books that follow people who work in the publishing industry. I think that's very fun. I thought Nora was such a relatable protagonist for me because I love how she's described as being like pessimistic, and she's such a city person and she feels very claustrophobic in a small town, but she also loves her sister with such a burning passion and she will literally do anything for her sister. But then also I loved, oh my god, the romance between Nora and Charlie is my favorite romance out of all of these because I loved their banter. I love the way they communicate with each other. They were just so cute. I loved the vibes of Sunshine Falls. It was very much giving me Schitt's Creek energy. I also just love Nora's love for New York City. Like that's also a thing that I related to her with, and I just love this. It's a 5-star, one of my all-time favorite romance books. And then coming in second place for me is actually gonna be Funny Story. I adore this book. I love this book so much, I think, because it has a lot of tropes that I tend to really like in books. Like I love the roommates to lovers trope. It's one of my top favorites. books. I also love fake dating to like try to make your ex jealous. I think it's so fun. I also just really loved the vibes and the characters in this book, and I thought it was hilarious. Like I remember so many moments where I was laughing out loud and I just had a really great time with it. My third place is gonna be People We Meet on Vacation, which is pretty shocking because I don't usually like the friends to lovers trope, but I think the reason why this one worked so much for me is because I read it at a time where like I read this kind of during the pandemic, you know, like when it came out in 2021, and it had been so long since I'd actually been on a vacation. So reading this, it felt like the perfect escapism. But then also I thought Poppy and Alex were so cute. And what I loved about this book is that we actually do get to see the flashback chapters of like when they first met in college and like some of their early days together, which that's usually what's missing for me from a friends to lovers romance. Is like I want to see how they became friends in the first place. You know, like I need to see some of their first interactions, and I loved that we had that in this book, and I just adore these characters so much. All right, and then coming in fourth place, I'm gonna have Happy Place, which this is still a book that I gave 5 stars. I've given 4 of Emily Henry's books 5 stars. Like that's how much I love so many of her books. This one was also kind of surprising how much I loved it because I'm not the biggest fan of second chance romances either, but I do love the fake dating element in this book. Oh my god, I ate that shit up. I also just really loved and connected with like the group of friends in this book and the way that this book writes about friendship and how difficult it can be to like maintain those friendships going into adulthood when like all of our lives start to change. I really loved that about this one. In 5th place, I'm gonna be putting Beach Read, which I seem to have the unpopular opinion when it comes to Emily Henry's books because everybody seems to love this one, but I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. I thought it was just okay. It was actually the first adult romance book that I ever read from Emily Henry because I read all of these in publication order, and I was just a little bit underwhelmed by this one, and I think it's mostly because of the serious tone of this book really took me off guard. I was expecting something a little bit more fun and like more like a beach read, you know, like something silly, lighthearted, and this book just was not that. It was very heavy, and as much as I loved January in this book, I feel like I mostly had an issue with the love interest, Augustus. There were just some moments where he would just piss me off and I just couldn't really vibe with him, so I ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. And then sadly in last place is the new Emily Henry book, Great Big Beautiful Life. Sadly, this one just did not work for me. I actually ended up giving this one 2, maybe like 2.5 out of 5 stars because this one, in my opinion, was so boring because not only was the romance like not that great, I didn't really feel that much chemistry between them, but then also the romance is really like the back seat in this story because most of this story is about this woman named Margaret and her life, and I just didn't care about this woman Margaret. I wanted way more of the romance and way less about her. And this one also has this like historical fiction kind of vibe to it because you're reading so many chapters about this woman Margaret, and I just didn't really vibe with this one. It was not my favorite. So now that you know how I feel about all of them, where should you start? And I always say this, but my first piece of advice is just to start with the book that sounds the most interesting to you because everybody has different reading tastes and you never know which one is going to end up being your favorite. So I would just recommend starting with the book that you think has the most interesting premise. But I would also say I think that Funny Story might be a good place to start because this book is her highest rated book that has over 1 million ratings. I feel like this one has got to be her most loved book. It's really rare for me to see somebody not liking Funny Story. Like I think everybody loves Funny Story, right? So I think maybe this one would be the best place to start because it's her most loved book, I think. And also maybe Beach Read would be a great place to start because it's her first published adult romance, and if you want to read them in publication order like I did, maybe Beach Read is a good place to start. And also because everybody seems to love Beach Read. You know, like I seem to be one of the only people that feel kind of meh about Beach Read, but like everybody else loves it, so maybe you should just start there. I mean, I would also recommend starting with Book Lovers because if you're gonna read any book from her, I would recommend my personal favorite. And if you're also the kind of person who is like much more of a city person and like feels very claustrophobic in a small town, and also maybe if you have a good relationship with your sister, if you have a sister, maybe this one would be the one that I would recommend to start with. I also wanted to take a minute to recommend some authors that I think have similar vibes. If you like Emily Henry's books, I think you could also enjoy books from these authors. I mean, one of the most obvious ones for me to recommend has got to be Abby Jimenez. I feel like Abby Jimenez is one of the only authors that's actually like competing right now with Emily Henry for being one of the most popular romance authors in the genre. But I do want to recommend these 3 books specifically because I think these are 3 of her best books, and they're actually all part of the same trilogy. I mean, you can read them out of order if you want to, but Part of Your World is the first book, and then Yours Truly is the second book, and then Just for the Summer is the third book in the series. And out of these 3, Just for the Summer is my personal favorite, but I do think that if you like Emily Henry's style, I do think you'll probably love Abby Jimenez as well. I also want to recommend the author Ashley Poston because if you like Emily Henry's writing, I feel like there's a really good chance that you would love these books as well, but specifically these 2 books because I've read another book from Ashley Poston that I didn't really care for, but these 2 books are incredible. incredible. And I always want to recommend these to Emily Henry fans because I feel like these books read like Emily Henry books to me, but if her books included a little sprinkle of something magical, because in The Dead Romantics, this book involves a girl falling in love with a ghost. Like, yeah, it sounds weird, but it's amazing. And then The 7-Year Slip involves a character who's falling in love. There's like time travel elements. There's like a 7-year time loop thing happening in this one. And so I think if you like Emily Henry's stuff and you want something that feels familiar to that, but you want just a little sprinkle of something magical, oh my gosh, read one of these books. They're so good. I would also recommend the author Alexandria Bellafleur, especially if you're looking for romance books that involve more queer characters, especially this trilogy of books. The first book in this series is Written in the Stars, and then the second book is Hang the Moon, and then Count Your Lucky Stars is the third book. And in this series, you are following the same friend group of characters. They all live in Seattle. And the great thing about this book series is that every single one of these books has queer characters in it. And there's also a lot of talk about astrology because one of the characters in this first book is an astrologist, and they all do involve some fun romance tropes. Like I remember this one involves fake dating in the first book, and then one of these also involves like the roommates to lovers trope. But I just had a lot of fun, and if you want a romance series that follows the same group of friends in a city, I would highly recommend these. And then lastly, I also want to recommend the author Alison Cotron, especially, you know, once again, if you're looking for some fun romance books that also involve queer characters, because The Charm Offensive is a male-male romance that I absolutely adore, and then Kiss Her Once for me has got to be one of my favorite sapphic romances that I've ever read in my life. This one definitely has a little bit more of a Christmas setting, or like it takes place around the holidays, and I just think if you liked Emily Henry's style, there's a good chance you would like these too. Okay, and then next up I wanted to do that if you like this Emily Henry book, then you should also check out either this book, movie, TV show, something that I found similar. The first one that I want to recommend is if you liked Happy Place by Emily Henry, then you should absolutely read The Ex-Vows by Jessica Joyce, because I found both of these books to be very similar, and I actually liked this one even more because both of these stories involve a second chance romance where characters are going to be coming back together after being broken up, and they're going to be surrounded by their friends once again because, you know, this one, as I mentioned, it's the cottage in Maine, but then in The Ex-Vows, it's because one of their shared best friends is getting married, and so they're going to have to see each other again after being split up for 5 years. And this one has so much fun, like wedding chaos, and the chemistry between these two characters is absolutely insane. But I think the main reason too why these ones remind me a lot of each other is because of the way that the adult friendships are written. You know, like I was saying, there's a lot of talk about like how it's so hard to maintain your friendships as you're trying to get into adulthood and like your lives are looking so different. But like, God, both of these books are so good, but like I highly recommend The Ex-Vows. It's so much fun. And then next up, I would say if you liked beach read, I would highly recommend reading The Roughest Draft, because this book is actually everything that I wanted beach read to be, and I actually liked The Roughest Draft even more, which I know is an unpopular opinion and it's a hot take, but I loved The Roughest Draft because like beach read, you're following the story about these two writers, but both of these writers, they have written and successfully published a few different books together, but then this story is taking place a few years later after they've broken up and they haven't written anything together in a really long time, and this story is about how they're going to be coming back together to write one more book, and like, dude, oh my god, the tension between them as they're writing together, this is everything that I wanted from beach read. Like, this is everything that I wanted from like two writers who are going to be writing these beautiful scenes together. I just loved it. I loved the tension between these two in The Roughest Draft, so I would recommend checking this one out, especially if maybe you didn't like beach read as much. I also think if you enjoyed Funny Story by Emily Henry, then I think you need to watch the show New Girl, because I'm telling you, this love interest in this book, Miles, he's basically Nick Miller, and I mean that in like the best way possible. Like, this book reminded me so much of New Girl, and I can't even explain why. I think part of it also has to do with like the roommates to lovers kind of thing happening in this book, but like the characters and like the silliness and how fun I had with this book, it totally reminded me of all of my feelings for New Girl. And New Girl is just such a fun show. Oh my gosh, if you've never watched it, it's one of my favorite sitcoms of all time. It's just hilarious. I love the characters so much, and I really do think you'd get a lot of joy out of New Girl if you loved Funny Story. I also think, I don't know exactly why, but I do think if you loved Funny Story, you might also like Savor It by Tara DeWitt. I think it's because in the book Savor It, the town really does play a big part in the story, much like this one does. And I think the characters just kind of remind me of each other in this, and both of these books were also very funny, but had a lot lot of like heartfelt moments at the same time. Like these are both my ideal perfect rom-com kind of books. And I love that in this book, the guy character Fisher, he's a chef and then he's also a guardian to this little girl. And this one takes place in Oregon, in this little town called Spoons. I just really adored the book Savor It, and I think if you liked Funny Story, you might like Savor It as well. My next one is gonna be if you liked the book Book Lovers, then of course I recommend checking out the TV show Schitt's Creek, because like I just mentioned, the little town in this book of Sunshine Falls definitely reminded me of the town Schitt's Creek. And Schitt's Creek is one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Like I'm so serious. If you need a show that's gonna make you laugh and make you feel good, and it's like one of the most wholesome things you've ever seen, then you need to watch Schitt's Creek because it is such a wholesome show and I miss these characters so much. I think about these characters every single day. I also think though that if you liked Book Lovers because of this character's love for New York City and you want more romance books that take place in New York City, then I have a few recommendations for you. I would definitely recommend Lease on Love. I would recommend The Butterfly Project. I would also recommend The Neighbor Favor. Same with Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino, as well as Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. So those are all some romance books that take place in New York that I really enjoyed. And if you liked Great Big Beautiful Life, of course I'm gonna recommend that you read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because I think this book was like very clearly inspired by Evelyn Hugo. And I also think Evelyn Hugo is far more interesting. Like if you read Great Big Beautiful Life and you were like, oh, I mean, I really like the romance, but like Margaret's life was not that interesting, I would say literally same, bestie, but also have you read Evelyn Hugo? I'm not even kidding you when I say that Margaret wishes she was half as interesting as Evelyn Hugo. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is one of my favorite books that I've ever read in my life, so I would highly recommend reading this one anyways, but especially if you enjoyed or if you were disappointed in Great Big Beautiful Life, because it's so obvious to me that this book was really inspired by this one. And then lastly, if you liked People We Meet on Vacation, I would highly recommend checking out Slow Dance by Rainbow Rowell. I actually think these two are very similar in the way that we're following these characters who are friends to lovers and who just have this very like slow burn thing happening between them. I usually don't like the friends to lovers trope. Like it is not my favorite. And so that's why I was so shocked that both of these books were 5 stars for me. The only major difference between these two is that these characters first met in college, whereas I believe these two characters first met in high school. But similarly to People We Meet on Vacation, Slow Dance also, you know, we follow these characters over a big period of years in their life. I think it's about a decade of their life. And we kind of get to see like how their life looks different in adulthood. But then also similar to this book, it's like these characters had some kind of like falling out where like they're not talking to each other anymore. And we're trying to figure out why and like what really happened between them. And so gosh, if you liked People We Meet on Vacation, I'm telling you, read Slow Dance. I love this book so much. I also think another romance that I really liked that also has friends to lovers is Ready or Not, but I do hesitate to recommend this one for fans of this book because this book also involves, you know, a pregnancy. This girl finds out right at the beginning of this book that she's pregnant, but then it's also kind of like a messy love triangle type of story because she gets pregnant by this guy named Ethan who's a bartender, and it's just like a one-night stand kind of situation. Like she doesn't know this man, but then the main romance is happening with this guy named Shep who is her childhood best friend. It's her best friend's brother. And so this story definitely also has that kind of like friends to lovers thing where like he's gonna be trying to like help her through the pregnancy and he's known her for his whole life. And so I would recommend this one as well. I gave this book 5 stars. I loved this. All right, and then the last section of this video is gonna be for the Swifties because I thought I would challenge myself to try to pick a Taylor Swift song that best represents each one of these books. So I thought we would start with Beach Read, and the song that I picked for Beach Read that I feel like fits this book perfectly is The Tortured Poets Department. Not only because both of these characters, you know, they both are writers and they both do give off the tortured poets kind of vibe, but then also because of these lyrics. This song is describing this man, Augustus, to a T. When it says you're in self-sabotage mode, throwing spikes down on the road, but I've seen this episode and still love the show. The way that she loves him despite those things, and the way in the lyrics when it's like we're modern idiots. Like we think we're writing something great, but we're just modern idiots. And the who's gonna hold you like me? Nobody. Like nobody else is gonna understand him the way that she does because of the way that he eventually opens up to her. And the whole idea of like, I chose this cyclone with you. Oh my god, I just feel like this song fits these two characters in particular very well because Augustus is definitely a tortured poet and I will hear nothing else. All right, and then next up for People We Meet on Vacation, I'm not gonna lie, this is one that I struggled with a little bit to pick a song, but I ended up going with Delicate because I do think that this song, especially the lyrics of like, is it cool that I said all that? Is it chill that you're in my head? Because I know that it's delicate. It's like when you're taking those first steps from becoming more than friends, I feel like it is something something that's very delicate, right? Like it's something that you don't want to screw up. And you're constantly wondering like, are they feeling the same level of feelings that I am? Or like, are we moving too quickly? And because they both live in different parts, you know, because he lives in a small town and she lives in New York City, I love the line, do the girls back home touch you like I do? Because he lives somewhere else and it's like, no, they don't, bitch. And the whole idea of maybe like this relationship not being for the best because you're friends and you don't want to ruin your friendship. So I do think the song Delicate fits them very well. And then for book lovers, I ended up choosing the song Gold Rush. I really like the idea of Gold Rush for them because I love the lyrics of I don't like that falling feels like flying till the bone crush. And like everybody wants you, but I don't like a gold rush. I do think that Gold Rush could fit this book very well just in terms of like Nora feeling a little bit intimidated to like get to know Charlie and like she doesn't want to have to go all in with him. But then I also think the song Antihero would fit the character Nora very well. Like feeling like she's always the problem and that midnights become her afternoons and like she's an overthinker. I feel like either one of those songs could describe this one. And the next one is gonna be Happy Place. And like my first thought, like my gut reaction when I thought for this book is Cruel Summer. They're spending the summer with their friends and it's cruel. It's a cruel summer for them because they're like forced to be around each other and pretend to be together and that's really hard for them. Especially the lyrics when it says, it's cool, that's what I tell them, no rules in breakable heaven. And like how hard it is to act like everything's fine when you're like dying on the inside. The whole like said I'm fine but it wasn't true. I don't want to keep secrets just to keep you. And because these characters are kind of like walking on eggshells around each other, I really think that line of the I screamed for whatever it's worth, I love you, ain't that the worst thing you ever heard? Because it's like they're still falling in love with each other even though they're broken up and it's messy. So I think Cruel Summer does fit these characters very well. And then I also thought of the song The Story of Us because it's like, yeah, The Story of Us looks a lot like a tragedy now. It's like they had this perfect romance together and now everything's fallen apart. And so I think The Story of Us really fits these characters as well. And then for funny story, I ended up picking the song Snow on the Beach. It's so fitting for them. When you really think about it, it makes me want to die. Because when the lyrics say life is emotionally abusive and time can't stop me quite like you did, and my flight was awful, thanks for asking, I'm unglued, thanks to you. And the whole idea of like now they're falling like snow on the beach and it's weird but fucking beautiful because like life has treated them so terribly recently where they're both going through these really awful breakups because the people that they were engaged to were assholes. And now it's like they're starting to find these moments of hope together and it feels like weird but also so right for them. And the line when it says you wanting me tonight feels impossible. And even the line of it's fine to fake it till you make it till you do. Like the fake dating thing? Are you kidding me? So I think the song Snow on the Beach is very, 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 very fitting for them. But then I also thought of the song Fresh Out the Slammer just because, you know, that song is all about like getting out of this, you know, kind of toxic relationship and like fresh out the slammer, I know who my first call will be too. And like them being able to find each other after such a stressful situation. I think that song could fit them as well. And then lastly, of course, we have Great Big Beautiful Life. The song is obviously going to be The Last Great American Dynasty. You know, Emily Henry even said herself that this book is inspired by this Taylor Swift song on Folklore. And I feel like you can really tell, you know, because this song, like the book, is kind of talking about this woman who like had this marvelous time ruining everything. And it's about this woman who like went against the norms in her time. And in the song, we're following this character named Rebecca, you know, like in the book, we're following Margaret. It's definitely inspired by The Last Great American Dynasty. And I do think it is a very fitting and perfect song choice for this book. All right, so that is going to be a wrap on the Emily Henry reading guide. You'll have to let me know how many Emily Henry books have you read? Which ones are your favorites? I would love for you to drop your rankings in the comments, or you can at least let me know which ones were your top 3 favorites. And if you've never read from Emily Henry before, and maybe this is your first time really hearing about what these books are about, do you think you're gonna give her books a try, and which book do you think you're gonna start with? I would also love to know all of that information. And again, I will have the other 2 reading guides that I've made before linked down in the description. If there are any other authors that you would like to see a reading guide like this for, then definitely let me know. I'm very excited to see what Emily Henry does next in the future. I'm also very excited to see if any more of her stuff is gonna get like adapted into like a movie or TV show, because I think right now People We Meet on Vacation is currently being adapted to be a movie, and like they already have the cast and everything for that. So I am very, very excited to see this one get adapted, and I think it's gonna be fantastic. Otherwise, I am really curious to see if any of her other books are gonna be getting adapted. I would be so here for it. I love seeing romance books especially get adapted into movies. I think that's so fun. So let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye!